brothers and sisters, cats and chicks, Dr. Mouth coming at you once again right here on the mighty YouTube. Slipped through the cracks. Thanks for stopping by and checking things out today. I hope you're having a great day. I'm having a great day because I get to talk about music, and I love doing that. So I'm going to just continue to do it right here. You know, sometimes when you sit down to do these videos, because as you can see from behind me here, I have a mountain of records. You know, you get ones together and you find this record and you go, okay, I got to do one about this record. And then it's like, I got to do one about this record. And, you know, I'm still deciding what I'm going to do in that. And then suddenly real life will happen and somewhat change the course of events. And the path that you were going to take has now been altered. So what I want to do today actually is talk about Danny Kirwan, who was the guitar player in Fleetwood Mac for just a short period from 1968 to 1972. He just passed away on June 18th, 2018. He was in his late 60s. The cause of death was unknown, but it kind of allows me also to do a record that I wanted to do anyways. And Danny Kirwan was just such a talented guy, not just as a guitar player, but as a writer, songwriter. Even his vocal style I really, really like. And he was an integral part of the early days of Fleetwood Mac before they became the huge pop band that they did with Rumors. In fact, for those of you that are joining and just the only Fleetwood Mac records, you know, are the huge hits of the 70s, Rumors, later records like Tusk, you know, the records that got a lot of attention. Fleetwood Mac had a long career. It doesn't start in the mid-70s. By that time, they had been together almost, actually probably more than 10 years at that point. They actually start way back in England in the 1960s, and they were put together by a guitar player by the name of Peter Green. And the name Fleetwood Mac came from the rhythm section of the band. Peter Green had Mick Fleetwood on drums and John McVie on bass. So the band became Fleetwood Mac. That's where they got the name. And they were really, you know, in the 60s in Britain, the blues boom was huge. There were lots of bands influenced by blues music. Obviously, you know, the Stones, bands like Led Zeppelin. Almost every British band had their foot in a little bit in the blues because it was just such a big thing at the time. And Fleetwood Mac were no different. Peter Green was an old school blues guy. He loved the Chicago blues. I think he loved all forms of blues, even going back to Robert Johnson. And so he put together this kind of rockin' blues band, and they were very good. They put out a couple of albums, and then in 1968, Peter Green heard about this other guitar player by the name of Danny Kirwan. The band's album producer, Mike Vernon, actually saw him play with his band that he had. Kirwan had a band called Boiler House, and they were quite popular. They played around, and so Vernon told Peter Green to go check them out, and he did. And he really liked Kirwan's guitar playing. I suspect because it is somewhat like Green in style to a certain degree, although both guys are pretty unique, I like to think. But I think at the time, the Fleetwood Mac had another guitar player by the name of Jeremy Spencer, and he was not in the same vein as Peter Green. Jeremy Spencer was more rock and roll than blues. He loved all the 50s stuff. He loved Buddy Holly. He loved Elvis, Little Richard. When Fleetwood Mac would play live, he would always try to work in the old covers of old 50s rock and roll tunes. So I think Green, by bringing in Kirwan, or he saw Kirwan, I think he thought, And first off, he was just going to manage Kirwan's band, Boiler House. But the other two guys in Kirwan's band didn't really want to be professional. So Green actually convinced the rest of Fleetwood Mac to let Kirwan join the band. And even though Green himself wasn't even sure if it was going to work out or not, but he did. They brought him into the band. So now we had three guitar players in Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green, Danny Kirwan, and Jeremy Spencer. So quite a big deal at the time. So the first thing that Kirwan plays on is actually an awesome instrumental that Peter Green wrote called Albatross. Went on to be a big hit in England, not so big in Canada, only made it to like number 45 or something. But in the UK, it was the #1 hit. It's called Albatross, and it's really a great, moody instrumental. I really, really dug it in that kind of classic Peter Green style. And Kirwan adds to it very nicely with some cool guitar. And so, you know, they were worried about bringing him in, and then the first thing they do with him gets to be a #1 hit. That's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal. So he's in, and the first album that Kirwan did with Fleetwood Mac, it's this one here. It's one of my favorites. It's called Then Play On. And this was an album that I already wanted to focus and introduce you guys to, because even though it had some success in England and not a huge success in North America, it really does kind of slip through the cracks, because everybody just thinks about Fleetwood Mac, as I mentioned. Rumors. Tunnel vision to rumors. That's all there is. And Fleetwood Mac, they've been around a long time. Even now in 2018, they are out on a summer tour. So I really wanted to kind of let people know about their other stuff when they were more of a blues band. Now, this record here, though, really, I think, is the best of the Peter Green era. In fact, Peter Green leaves the band after this era. And him and Danny Kirwan work together so well. In fact, they work together so well that Jeremy Spencer is hardly on this record at all. He is on it. Like, he plays a bit of piano, I believe, I've read, and stuff like that. But there's no kind of like old school rock and roll songs like you'd see in later Fleetwood Mac records, thanks to Spencer. None of that is here. It's really Kirwan and Green that are steering the ship. They've written pretty well all the tunes between them, with Kirwan actually writing about 7 of them and Green writing the other 5. So really, but great stuff here. So we're going to talk about this album, and we're going to play 4 of Danny Kirwan's tunes that he wrote himself and sings. And just so you can get a feeling for what he was like, and his interplay with Peter Green, because there really was something magical with these two guys when they would play together. I think they had a really expressive guitar playing, and really cool. And again, this is in the era. This is 1968. This is when a lot of the blues bands they're turning into heavy rock bands, right? And doing blues music. Guys like John Mayall. You got Cream with their kind of heavy blues. Led Zeppelin's on the horizon. That huge, big rock blues thing. And this is not really like that. And even typically, what's interesting is that the early Fleetwood Mac ones are kind of like that. They're kind of more your basic kind of heavy blues. Whereas on Then Play On, with Kirwan and Green, man, they really come up with something really cool. And again, something that's unique to its era, and I think unique today. I think it's an amazing record. So this is it, as I've shown. The cover, pretty interesting cover, eh? This is actually a very old piece of artwork from 1917. This was done by Maxwell Armfield, and it's called Domesticated Mural Painting. Domesticated Mural Painting. So there you go. That is the cover of the album there. And then on the inside, we just get a picture of the band. So you can see they're all there. Fleetwood, McVie, Spencer, Kirwan, Green. So kind of just a basic picture. But a great record. We're going to hear some songs now. I want to talk a little bit more about it, though, because this is one of those records, back in the 60s, the record companies loved to mess with artists. And it seemed like almost every British artist, up until a certain point, I think by the early 70s, we're done with this. But so many British bands release the album in the UK, and then the American record company gets their hands on it, and they chop it up, or they change it, or they want the hit single on there and all that. So that's what happened with Then Play On. Now, this one that I'm showing you here, this is a reissue that Rhino did back in, I think it's pretty recent, like 2013 maybe. And it basically follows the pattern of the British one, adds a couple extra other songs on it as well. And if you want to find a copy of the record, this is kind of the one to get, because the American editions, there were 2 of them, as I'll explain, and they don't flow as nicely as the original one here that the band wanted. So here is actually, this is, now the cover is exactly the same on the American one, right? It's exactly the same, front, back, nothing changing there. But it got released in 2 different forms in the States, because the song, Fleetwood Mac had put out a single right at the same time as Then Play On, but they didn't put it on the album. And the song was called Oh Well, and it got to be quite popular in England. It's a great tune. It's one of Peter Green's masterpieces, because it starts out as this heavy rock and blues thing, and then this goes off into this long classical, very melodic piece of music. It's great. I love it. I think it's amazing. And so when it got popular, the Americans treated singles differently. They always wanted the singles to be on the album, whereas in England, singles could exist as separate entities. Like the classic example is Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles, where in England, it just came out as 2 EPs with the 5 original songs for the Magical Mystery Tour movie. But see, here in North America, they had to do a full album. So all of side 2 is just 45s that hadn't appeared on Beatles records before, because they kept them as separate entities over there. So that's what was happening here. So unfortunately, the Americans got their hands on it, and this is when it first was issued. This is what it looked like here, and that's the track listing of songs. And as you can see, if you look at that, Oh Well is not there, right? Oh Well is not there. And this does pretty closely mirror the British one, although they took a couple of ones and they kind of messed around with them in that and changed the order up a bit. But that was the first version. Now, this is kind of funny. This version that I have, I bought this in a used store, and I didn't really realize it until I got it home and I looked at it. But the jacket is for the first version, but the record inside it is actually from the second version. So it's interesting if you look at the label here then, and you can see that Oh Well is on there. And they really changed the order around. They took there's two instrumentals on here called Fighting for Madge and Searching for Madge. And on the British one is on side one and the other's on side two. And on this one, in the American one, they butt them right up together. So you have this really big, long, extended jam. And then also including Oh Well on the album as well. You have this big, long jam. And there's a song as well on here that Peter Green wrote called Rattlesnake Shake that also is kind of a jam thing. In fact, when they would do this one live, we're talking like 20-minute jam on Rattlesnake Shake. So the American version really doesn't play as well because there's too much of the long jams, I think. Whereas the British one, it has the much more laid out, thought out process with the songs and stuff like that. So I just thought that's kind of funny that my used copy is a hybrid of original jacket, but second version of the record. So there you go. So as I mentioned, though, if you want to get it, the Rhino, I think the Rhino reissue is the one to go for. And it sounds really, really good, too. So let's get into some of the actual songs here with Danny Kirwan. He wrote, as I mentioned, 7 of the songs on the record, I believe. And the first one we're going to start with, it's the opening song on the record. So kind of, it welcomes you into Then Play On, which, again, as I mentioned, and you can see the blues roots are there, but it's not just a blatant hit you over the head heavy rock blues record. No, this is some really cool stuff here. And this tune, Coming Your Way, really starts off the record well. And hey, all you gorillas out there, listen for the crazy bongos in this one. So let's get into it here. Danny Kirwan on guitar with Peter Green as well and all of Fleetwood Mac. And this one's called Coming Your Way. And it is Coming Your Way.
I move every day. Hope you don't mind, 'cause I'm going your way. You've got things to do, you move every day. I hope you don't mind, 'cause I'm coming your way. You've got things to do, you move every day. Hope you don't mind, 'cause I'm coming your way.
So there you go. That's your introduction to Fleetwood Mac at this point when Then Play On came on. I like that tune. I think it's really catchy, and again, love the bongos in it, and love the guitar playing. Already, I'm tantalized. I remember when I first heard this record, I was already captured by the guitar playing right out of the gate there. Now, the thing about Kirwan, as we'll see with some of these other tracks, he definitely had a much more relaxed approach to this than most blues guys would. Again, it was all about the attack and the heaviness back then. And Kirwan is like a breath of fresh air in amongst that. And again, it really does work well with Peter Green. I can see why he wanted to have him in the band, because they really do work together. So this next one, very quiet, very melodic, but again, haunting. I guess haunting's a good word to describe some of the Kirwan songs on here, because they're very different, but they're minimal, but they really pull you in, which I thought was always a fascination. So let's hear another one from Then Play On, and it's called When You Say.
When you say that you know of all the good times to come, when you say that there'll always be you and when I say that I know of all the good times to come, when I say that there'll always be you and me. La 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 la
All right, so there you go. That's pretty relaxed, mellow kind of piece of work there. But again, very captivating, very haunting. I hope you're enjoying some of the good guitar interplay here we've got with Green and Kirwan. Interesting thing about the two of them actually is they didn't get along. Like, their guitars got along, and when they played together, they came up with some amazing stuff. But personality-wise, they didn't really get along. And apparently, Kirwan was very emotional fellow, often cried while he played guitar, I've been told. And very temperamental, and took things very seriously. Bob Welch, who's in later versions of Fleetwood Mac, commented that he was a very intense individual and very businesslike, and took things quite seriously. And so I think he was a very emotional a guy, and which is going to lead to problems later on, as we'll see. But let's get back to Then Play On here and hear another one of Danny Kirwan's songs here. Yeah, we're going to go with, he's lucky. He gets the opening track on side 1 and side 2. No matter which version you have, British, American, whatever, he gets to open both sides, which is pretty cool. And this is a good one here. And Kirwan had a love of old school jazz and stuff as well. And certainly this song to me is called Although the Sun is Shining. There are certain parts of it that totally remind me of it maybe being played in like a 20s or 30s jazz club with almost like a crooner maybe singing it and stuff like that. I think it'd be neat to see a modern day crooner, someone like that, take this song on. But again, great stuff here, very melodic, very cool. But at the same time, always has that haunting feeling to it. Always has that really, even though it's kind of, like I said, like a 20s thing, it's got that haunting thing for me. So I think you'll dig this one as well. Side 2 starts off, Although the Sun is Shining.
Although the sun is shining high above, there's one thing on my mind, you, my love. I see a weeping willow in the park. Like this, there's sadness growing in my heart. When love. There's one thing on my mind. You, my love.
Okay, brothers and sisters, cats and chicks, hope you're enjoying our little trip here down memory lane, celebrating the great achievements of Danny Kirwan, who was an awesome guitar player and definitely an instrumental part at this period of Fleetwood Mac's career. We're going to play one more track from Then Play On here, and this is such a great instrumental. I just love this, and it's a pity when the American version came out and they swapped it all around and messed with it, the second version, so they could put Oh Well on it. They took this song off. Idiots! Fools! I can't believe they took this song off. Oh, so ridiculous. It's so cool. Again, very melodic, very haunting, and so relaxed, like you're just lying under some clouds, and I just love it. It's a great hot summer day instrumental. Just lie in the backyard and listen to this, and you can almost get kind of dreamy. That's what it's called. It's called My Dream. So it's time for us to float off into the ether with Danny Kirwan and Fleetwood Mac. My Dream. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Love that instrumental, My Dream. Such a dream. It's dreamy. There is no doubt about it. That is a really cool, dreamy instrumental. So there you go. That's just a taste of Then Play On. Because I mean, This record is really good. That's only 4 of the songs. It's all really good. The blues stuff's good. But try to find the British version if you can, or try to get that Rhino version, because that's more the way the band did it at the time and the more that they wanted it, whereas the American one was just kind of messed up. And there are different CD versions, I think, that... I remember when Reprise put the CD version out in, I think it was like either late 90s or early 2000s. They really messed with it. They kind of tried to follow the American one, but they stuck a couple other songs on that weren't there. At least it had My Dream on it, though, so that's good there. As for Danny Kirwan, he was on, that was the first album he did with Fleetwood Mac. He was on the next 3. He was on Kiln House, which came after that. He was on Future Games, and he was on Bare Trees. Adding unique guitar playing and writing to all of those records, especially on Future Games. He does play some really great guitar playing on there. But around 1972 or so, things were kind of not good with the band. Apparently, Kirwan had a bit of a drinking issue and started to alienate himself from the band. And I just think they got tired of him after a while. And Bob Welch was not getting along good with him as either. So I think... they just kind of said, we got to call it a day. And he left the band in 1972. He went on, he did 3 solo albums. One was called Second Chapter in 1975. The other one was called Midnight in San Juan in 76, I think. And then the final one was called Hello There, Big Boy, and came out in 1979. Now, I've heard none of his solo records, so I can't really talk on that, but I do Kiln House, the record that came after Then Play On, has some cool stuff by him on it. Also, Jeremy Spencer got to do some of his 50s rock and roll stuff on there. Future Games, Bare Trees, they both have good moments on them from Kirwan. There's no doubt about that. But if you really want to listen to something else, I'll suggest one other thing here before we wrap this up. And if you want to hear more of the great interplay where it's Spencer, Kirwan, and Green all together, I recommend this one here. The vinyl is huge. You have to be a strong man to list this. Now, see, Peter Green left Fleetwood Mac. He was the first to leave. They had this amazing history where all 3 of these guys left under weird circumstances. Peter Green apparently had a bad acid trip, and it really messed with his mind psychologically, and weird depression, and he just got totally freaked out. So he leaves the band in May of 1970. And then a couple years after that, Jeremy Spencer goes all religious, ends up in what some have described as a cult. I'm not sure. They were called the Church of God. And he went religious. And then after that, in 1972, Danny Kirwan makes his exit because of the issues with the band and his own issues with alcoholism and stuff like that. So all 3 of these guys kind of left the band in a strange way. But if you want to hear all 3 of them live in their prime, kicking ass, then this record here, this is awesome. And there's been versions, you can get it on CD. It's a concert from Boston in February of 1970. So this is still, Peter Green is still in the band. And this is just amazing. They're doing tunes from Then Play On. They're doing lots of blues stuff and some great jams. Like, there's 2 different versions on here of Rattlesnake Shake that are like 23 minutes long. And there you get to really hear the Kirwan, Green, and Spencer, all of them playing together. It's pretty awesome. This has a lot of Spencer's, he likes to do all those crazy old rock and roll tunes. Keep a Knockin' is on there. And he does a lot of good old 50s rock and roll on here. So the concerts are really wild because you'll get these monolithic blues jams, and then you'll get a short set of like 4 or 5 rock and roll tunes in a row. Like, really, really cool. But as I said, guitar interplay is awesome. And this version here, this came out in 2007 on vinyl. It's like huge. It's like 4 or 5 records. I think it's 4 records. And it's great. And it's everything basically that they had taped over this 3-day period. Not everything got taped, but everything that they have pretty well is on this collection. And it is stellar. So if you want to hear more of that and those guys roaring, that is the place to do it. All right, I've done enough yapping. Hopefully I've inspired you to go off and check off some older Fleetwood Mac, especially if you're a fan that only knows them from Rumors On. Go back and check out their past. It's almost like a completely different band, really, because by the time you get to Rumors, all you have left of the originals is Fleetwood and McVie. That's it. It's a whole new other band, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks and all that kind of stuff. Changes completely, so you should go and check out their stuff from the past, and that's why I'm here. Dr. Mouth likes to come out and say, hey man, it's just not this, it's this, and this. All right? Okay, that's it for this time. If you'd like to subscribe, there's a little red button down at the bottom there. You can just push that. I'd also like to thank Kevin MacDonald for doing a great job editing these videos, making me palatable for the general public. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it. You can check me out on Instagram. I'll give you warnings whenever there's a new video coming out. And that is it. I'm going to get on out of here. Check out some old school Fleetwood Mac. All right. I'm Dr. Mouth. And once again, I thank you for watching.